Hello, my name is Kathleen McCarty. I'm the state representative from the 38th District, which covers all of Waterford and a portion of Montville. This will be my fourth year, my second term, heading into this election, and it's been a true privilege and an honor for me to serve all of the residents of the district. I serve on the Education, Public Health Appropriations Committee, and I am the co-chair of the Internship Committee. These are all very important committees, and I've enjoyed my work tremendously at those committee work. My background is in education. I've been a long-standing Board of Education member. I should add, former Board of Education member. I am also a business owner, so I try to bring the background that I have in education as well as my business background to the complex issues that are facing the state of Connecticut. So I believe that I am well equipped, and I hope that my constituents will return me to work in the 38th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you could, kind of talk about the learning curve a representative goes through it, and say this would be your second term, so you'll have one term under your belt if the voters decide to send you back. So if you could kind of talk learning curve and give us a couple of highlights you think you'd like to point out from your first term.
Right. Well, it's an excellent question because there is a very steep learning curve. As you know, the state, one of the major areas of the work of a legislator is looking at state budget. And on Appropriations Committee, I was thrust into that right away. And you do a lot of committee work depending on which committees you're assigned to. But it's very complicated because you need to really study and know what the different agencies are doing and how they all interrelate with one another. So as a freshman legislator, it was very difficult in the beginning to see how the entire structure worked. The second term got a little better, having stayed on the same committees and then working again in appropriations. So I think I brought quite a bit at that level to the attention of, especially on the Education Committee, having worked there for so long and understanding the true impact of mandates on local boards of education and on putting more and more mandates on teachers. So I tried to bring that to the level of the committee work, that as we went back to form the budget, that it was understood clearly of what actually our actions were doing. But the budget itself, if I may point out, I was going to mention, it's an enormous document covering so many different agencies. And I really believe that we can improve upon it going forward. The budget, we really have to base our budget on priorities. I'm going to be a very strong advocate of evidence-based budgeting, which would primarily, what it would say is that we need to identify what our core functions of government are. What are we interested in accomplishing? What are our goals? And I think it becomes ever more important in this time where we're facing such a fiscal crisis. So rather than approaching the budget in a piecemeal, I think we need to have a true comprehensive plan and a strategy that identifies those goals. I will go on the record to say that I am a very strong advocate of protecting our core vital services, critical services. So I would put those at the top of the list and say, look, this is what we are here to do. Let's protect the mental health services, the IDD services. Let's protect education. Let's look at our transportation infrastructure. But then also combined with that, I think it's important that we look at evidence-based outcomes, that once we've established those priorities and we see where we want to go, then we have to be sure that they're effective and that they're working properly. So I think my couple of years have taught me that the budget is a big, as I said, document, but there are ways that we can improve it. This past session, as a bipartisan effort, was made to look and listen to all concerns, and I think that the party that I belong to was a leader in saying, look, we must get spending under control. And that was a big issue. We did institute the constitutional spending cap, the volatility cap, and the bonding cap. And those are areas that we need to continuously focus on. We need to be proactive and cut spending, but again, I'll go back to my remarks that protecting quality of life and critical services. So to me, that's an important area, that we get our budget under control, but that we do it in a comprehensive way, a way that makes sense, not different committees who has in the committee work, and then it goes out of committee. That was also a big mystery to a lot of people. It goes out of committee after you've made your recommendations and you sat there, and then it goes to a new level, a leadership level, and then from there the budget is formed. But I think there's probably a new approach that could have positive results for us. So again, I'm sorry I've gone way off, but it is a steep learning curve, and I think that now I have the experience there, the voice, and I'm going to bring back some of these issues and some of these areas where I think we can improve the entire process. Another piece is the Appropriations and the Finance Committee work separately, and we need to get those two committees joined so we know what our revenue is coming in, what our spending will be going out. That's been another issue with the budget process, and that was very difficult to come to. One thing I did notice almost immediately, even as a freshman, that several of the agencies were not speaking to each other. So we want to be careful and be cautious that we protect the agencies, but that we don't duplicate services, that we find cost efficiencies within the agencies and make sure that they're sharing data and that they're working together. And I think there has been concerted effort moving us in that direction now. But the agency work, the budget work, it is a big learning curve. The part that I will tell you that wasn't too much of a learning curve for me was working with my constituents. That I had found, you can look at me, the life experience brings something to the table, and being able to talk to my constituents to help them with their concerns has been a lot of satisfaction for me, and I've enjoyed that part very, very much, and I hope I'll be able to continue to do that.
Do you think phasing out and elimination of the state income tax, is that a realistic goal, and is it even an appropriate goal for the legislature?
Thank you. At this time, and I will say that I do believe that Connecticut is one of the highest tax states. We all know that in the nation, and we're taxed in every level. This last budget, we did cut back $1.3 billion in taxes, but I think if there's going to be a reduction or an elimination of the income tax, that again would have to be approached in a very comprehensive manner, starting with the spending and the revenue that's coming in. I can't imagine at this point eliminating the income tax, which is bringing in over 50% of the income, without a real comprehensive plan. Perhaps if we were to grow our business climate and improve our economic growth, we have right here in southeastern Connecticut an opportunity with thousands and thousands of jobs with EB, with the aerospace, a lot of the industry here. If we can continue to improve our economic climate by job growth and employment, and get our businesses healthy and having them want to come to Connecticut, to stay here, for us to raise our families and retire here. If we can get all of the pieces together, then I think we can start a slow reduction of the personal income tax. But without a comprehensive plan and all the pieces coming together, I can't see how, because as I said in the beginning of my opening remarks, I'm a very strong advocate for maintaining our critical services, and I would be worried as to how we would maintain those if we were to, so I think it has to be a long-term plan. But in the meantime, there might be ways that we can start to reduce taxes on some of our businesses and to increase the climate. Also, another way without reducing taxes would be to look at our burdensome regulatory climate. We need to continue to streamline permits and to help our grow our businesses. I was pleased during this last legislative session that we did and I co-sponsored the bill to help with the bioscience sector and to bring and to really pay attention to what we have here in Connecticut. I'm one of the I'm very proud to be from Connecticut. I think we have a tremendously high quality of life here, and we need to protect those areas that we excel at. And I think there's a sector out there that's going to be moving in the direction of bioscience, STEM, technology. We have to protect those areas and by creating a climate that says to our venture capitalists, come here to Connecticut, offering some tax incentives and credits. That may be one way. Let's look at those areas. Today I was thinking about what we have here in southeastern Connecticut with our tourism and our cultural organizations. I'm another strong advocate for protecting the arts and culture and tourism. Those areas bring in a tremendous amount, hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of jobs to southeastern Connecticut and throughout the state. So I think it kind of goes back again to your original question, kind of pulling all of these areas together when we look at a budget to see what we're going to do, what's bringing back the income, where we are doing evidence-based research, and if you see that something is bringing back the dollars, let's examine it thoroughly before we cut. I did put in a bill quite a while ago, I'm still working on it, that we should have a 2/3 vote in the legislature when we put unfunded mandates, whether it be on business or education, and really understand what the outcome of placing those burdensome mandates. I am proud that on my work in the Education Committee, worked hard to have a bill go forward that did exactly that. It took away some of the mandates that we had placed on boards of education with respect to professional development. We offered that more flexibility there. The regional calendar, which I had heard from our Chamber of Commerce needed to be looked at, we were able to eliminate that, so gave more flexibility to the school districts. We're looking at teacher certification and alternate routes to certification. So a lot has gone on in the Education Committee. One other area that I would like to point out that as a candidate, I try to do truly what is best for my community. I look to my constituents, I send out surveys and e-blasts to try to gather information so I understand where my constituents are and how they feel about certain things. So I would like to continue to do that. One area where I did break from there were a number of Republicans that didn't agree to this, but I thought it was important to divide the Department of Education from the tech schools and career, because we had so many vacancies in the tech schools in there for teachers replacement and for different areas. And I thought, well, if we're going to have 25,000 new jobs here and we need the manufacturing pipeline, we had better make certain that we have the teachers there in the classrooms and that we're able to continue with that movement. So I'm happy to see that that did become law, and as we go forward, it'll be implemented. It's still right now under the Department of Education, but as it goes forward, it'll have their own board, just as the local school boards do, and they're made up of very highly qualified people, excellent superintendents, so I'm expecting to see good things coming out of the tech ed school system, continuing the cooperation with our community colleges to make sure that we have an educated and skilled workforce. No secret again in Connecticut that we're an aging population, so we need to be sure that we have the workforce that's going to meet those demands going forward. But I could go on and on, so I don't know whether you want to.
Just to follow up on a couple of things you said.
Yeah.
Protecting core values and core
Yes.
programs. Gave some examples in the human service area, education. You talked about the importance of arts and culture and tourism, particularly in our district. And those are things a Democrat sitting across from me could say too. So what are the foundational principles that sort of make you a Republican that would separate you perhaps, from a Democratic majority? What
Well,
are those?
that's an interesting question, but I can tell you it was really and truly the Republicans that really pushed hard for the mental health services, and I was a very strong voice within that caucus. So I do believe that if you looked at the governor's budget proposal and then the Democratic proposal afterwards, there were tremendous cuts to the mental health programs, to substance and abuse programs. I came forward in my caucus to say this has to be a number high one priority. I think I've mentioned to you before, my family has been interested in this issue for decades. My father introduced the iris as the symbol for mental illness awareness to the National Association, and I worked in France and throughout the world to try to have this adopted because Van Gogh painted the irises when he was ill. I think it's important to destigmatize the mental health, and I think the Republicans have taken a lead in that area. And so in the budget, you need to have, so that's why I'm saying we need to have that core service identified, and I think the Republicans have come out as the leaders there, and also with the IDD population. These individuals suffer the cuts that were realized in the budget, in the governor's budget. We fought and brought back the employment and day services, or one of them, the graduate funding, just really trying to protect our individuals with disability. And we have a long way to go. We're not there yet. We have to fight for the community choice, first choice program, and continue to take our individuals with disability off the waiting list. But these were initiatives that were really pushed by the Republican Party, and I'm very proud of that. And I think I had an influence within our caucus in those areas. And I think it's important. Everyone's entitled to have the best possible life that they can and the quality of life, and that's why I'm there.
What can the legislature do about the legacy problem of the grossly underfunded pension funds, both teachers and state workers? And also you have the debt, but in particularly the pension that provides no services now, but it's something that the state's playing catch up on. It's eating up a bigger and bigger portion of the budget. What ideas might be brought forward to kind of deal with that problem?
Well, you've identified the looming problem out there, and everyone knows we didn't get here overnight, and I think it's going to take us quite a while to resolve the problems. There has been more dialogue this time around in the legislature to really try to pay down some of our long-term obligations. I know we have, you've probably heard, there's a new commission in place, Commission on Fiscal Stability and Economic Growth. They do make some recommendations, but for us to follow all through with them, we have to do a number of other things. But the unfunded liabilities need to be addressed. And I think one in the teacher retirement pension fund, there was the Republican budget actually wanted to pay down 1/3 of those with the excess monies that we had in the rainy day fund, but that was not part of the compromised budget. I think going forward we can look at some of the lottery funds to see if we can't divert some of those to pay down the teacher retirement pension fund. We did ask the teachers to increase their contribution from 6 to 7%, which I know was very difficult for the teachers, but that money goes directly into the fund. This time around, the first time the legislature met its responsibility, and we pushed to pay the teacher health insurance fund to its 33% obligation. But the long term, the CBAC agreement, as we know, I think there were some very good things that were in the CBAC agreement, but there were also some areas that kind of tied the hands of the legislature going out until 2027, which makes it a little more difficult to look at how we can make some of the structural reforms that will be necessary to ultimately bring the pension liabilities into need. But again,
And
if
that's
you
the reason you voted against it, is that fair to say that it
yes,
ended up
yes,
too
it
far?
was, that was primarily the reason, because it didn't give us any flexibility for a long time, although I recognize some of the sacrifice that was made by our state employees in the CBAC agreement. So I try in my approaching my job to look at the plus and the minus, and to try to come together and to find a good compromise. But Paul, that's a hard question to answer without, I think it's going to take a lot of reform on a lot of levels. We got to get that business climate going and moving, bring back the economy of Connecticut, and as we have more revenue and more jobs, we'll be able to continue to pay it down.
Would you be open to refinancing and extending out the teacher obligations like was done with the state pensions? Is that
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure yet. We did one positive in that we put a commission together to look at teacher retirement funding and to see. So I'd like to see some of the recommendations where that will go. But I know these teachers, having been an educator myself, I know that teachers work very hard, and we want to make sure that their retirement fund is solvent and that it's there. So we need to come together to try to find those solutions. If I may add something that I didn't say, I'm a very strong proponent of rebalancing our long-term care. I've introduced bills for home care expansion. I think that we have, as I said, an aging population. We have some 20,000 residents in nursing homes, and I'd like to see us continue the rebalancing, and we can save hundreds of millions of dollars going forward, protect the quality of life, and help people stay in their homes. One area that I would also like to really investigate more are volunteers on all levels. That's important that we use our volunteers in our community to help with services, and we need to be creative. We're at a time where we need to be creative and find ways. I have a constituent was part of a volunteer residency advocate program where you have volunteers go into the nursing homes. That has dwindled. I'm trying to rebuild that so that people have visitors. Some people are not there, but they also look out for their interests. So I've taken a strong interest in the legislature protecting our seniors, and some of the bills I put through have become law with the neglect and abuse area, and I'd like to continue to examine those areas.
We're blowing through our half hour quick, and I want Ben a chance to ask a couple of questions for sure. But one question we're asking everyone, so wanting to get that question is on tolls. Should the state introduce tolls as a way of raising revenues to address our transportation needs or not? What's your view on that?
Okay. I think you asked me that
Probably did.
one time before. So I will say that at this juncture, right now, I would not be in favor of tolls, and I'll tell you why. We have a constitutional lockbox on this ballot coming up that asks our residents if they believe I do, and I think it's important. If you can convince me that monies that would be generated that would stay in the transportation lockbox and be used for infrastructure, our rails, our bus, and then I would be open to hearing the dialogue. Right now, the way it was presented to us, the plan that was proposed had tolling throughout the state. It wasn't just on I-95 and I-91. It was throughout. There were somewhat in the neighborhood of 70 plus tolls, and that would be unacceptable to me. We can't do border tolls. You lose your federal investment, which is somewhere in the $600 million range. So you have to be careful about if if the residents were to move, if we were to move toward tolling, we'd have to have it done in a very logistical and definite plan that would be associated with it, and a security of the funds. So at this time, regrettably, I know right now, but my constituents in my survey are also no. So as I said, I put those out.
But if the lockbox passes and it demonstrates that it's actually working, then
I'll keep an open mind.
Okay.
I will keep an open mind, as I try to do on every issue, to do what's best. But I would be leaning away from what I have seen currently. It's another tax on our residents. 70% of the funding that would come in would come from our residents. So they would have to have that confidence that that money was being used appropriately. I don't think the safety issue is there anymore where it was years ago, with the technology.
Yeah, right.
So.
Ben, a couple of questions?
Well, it's interesting to go from the lockbox to one thing I wanted to ask you. It's about energy. The state, faces a lawsuit from some environmental companies and from some energy companies because in order to fill budget gaps, the state, in a budget deal, agreed to take ratepayer funds and put it into the general fund. These are ratepayer funds that are, part of your electricity bill, and they usually go towards home energy audits, solar installs, things like that. And these companies say that they're losing business because they're not getting the assistance that they need from the state that they normally would. I guess I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about that and where you stand on that, and if there are ways that the state should be filling budget gaps that don't involve taking energy funds that are supposed to be geared towards energy efficiency.
Right. I know there was some discussion about that, and I think that, again, when our ratepayers are paying into something, that they should have the confidence that the money is going to be used for those areas, and that the state should really not be confiscating funding for outside of the purpose for which it was intended. I think we did try to reduce some of that funding when it occurred, and the Republicans actually went back in and took some of that funding back out. But since we're talking about energy, if I may, I would like to, I don't know whether you were planning to ask me this question, but the number one priority for me, aside from what I've mentioned on the core services and education, I worked very hard to protect Millstone here, to keep Millstone in Connecticut, and that to prevent it from a premature closing. And I don't usually boast about what I've done, but I have to tell you, because if I don't tell you, you won't know. And so I'd like to point out that it was very hard to get that bill called, first of all. And for my first term, it was impossible. In my second term, I said we need to have this bill heard, and just the leadership would not call the bill. So I took it upon myself to really work hard within our legislature to educate my colleagues about it. I brought the CEOs from Dominion up to Hartford to meet with our leadership. I wrote letters to the leadership. I created petitions, which I had all the legislators sign. I designed letters that just this summer, in July, for the 3 weeks on the telephone, calling all of my colleagues that had supported the bill to now let's make sure that DEEP and PURA look at the confirmed at-risk status and help to and Dominion was an excellent player throughout this. What they said in the beginning held true throughout, that they were interested in getting in the market. They were facing financial difficulty, and whether they'd be sustainable in the long term. In the end, all turned out to be accurate. They produced their financial records to the regulators. They're looking at this now. We're in the middle of a bidding process, which I'm happy after I created this letter and called my legislative friends and had over 50 signatures during a summer, which I want speaks well for my colleagues that they would take the interest. We sent that to DEEP. They did, even though they didn't change exactly the way we had requested, at least they were following the spirit of the law and came back to say that they would allow Millstone to be in the bidding process and considered at risk if they were determined to be at risk. And as you know, Ben, you've done excellent work reporting on this, the two streams going tandem with each other, that Pura and Deep, and I believe Pura has said they confirm them at risk. So that will give them not only the benefits of producing carbon-free energy and reducing our greenhouse gas emission, but it'll also help our environment, the economy, and so they'll get credit for all of their attributes. And I think that's really a tremendous service to the state of Connecticut. But for me, it was very personal because I was looking at all the years in Waterford where we built up our schools and the infrastructure, and then the thought of losing 28 million, 30 million to our local tax base was an enormous motivator for me to say we've got to be out there and really work on this. Aside from, I truly and sincerely believe that nuclear energy is a clean energy and it's going to transition us into all of the other renewables that the comprehensive energy strategy is proposing, and to reduce our gas or green gas emissions long term. So in order to get to what the Department of Environmental Energy and Protection, what they want to do, in order to get there, we have to have nuclear in the portfolio. But I'm delighted to see the wind farms and the solar farms, as long as they're done. I know we have a solar farm issue in Waterford and the wind farm here. So I'm very strong on clean energy and renewables, but we need to do it in a comprehensive way again. But Millstone was my number one priority, and it was a success that we got the legislature behind it, and we did get it called. And I want to recognize the minority leader. She helped a lot because she really went to bat to bring this to the attention of the leadership, and they were convinced that if I could get the votes that they would call it, and I worked very hard to do that. And of course, Senator Formica on the Energy Committee, he worked hard in the Senate, so together we were able to really bring this forward. It took a long time. It was 4 years just to get to this point. Now I'm hoping that, and I know Millstone has put forward a number of bids, and with the hope that we're going to be able to reduce the ratepayers' bill. That was all along. That was said all along. One of the major goals was to try to reduce electricity bills for our ratepayer, and that's on the horizon. So I'm hoping DEEP will see that.